Their breaths became more rapid as the distance between them was no longer a barrier. Every time his hand lightly brushed against her skin, she could feel the rough but warm texture. Each time he pulled her closer, the gentleness wrapped in strength made her powerless to resist. Their lips intertwined, their breaths merging, as if they were lost in a world of their own, where nothing existed except two people letting their instincts lead the way. The quiet space of the church, once a place of prayer, now bore witness to their loss of control. Everything was slow but carried immense weight. They gradually stripped away the layers of hypocritical morality, exposing their deepest desires. In that moment, the taboo was forgotten, leaving only two people, bare before each other, abandoning all responsibilities and guilt, even if only for a few fleeting moments. Their burning skin touched, creating a stark contrast between the heat of passion and the coldness of sin. In a peaceful village, where everyone knew each other and lived quiet lives, one day was suddenly shaken by a horrifying discovery. A local farmer, while passing through the edge of the forest on his way home after a long day of work, accidentally caught the strange stench of decay. His steps slowed as the smell grew stronger, and his curious eyes followed the trail that led to a dense bush. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the scene before him, the lifeless body of a young girl, already beginning to decompose, lying cold among the wild grass and dried leaves. The entire village couldn't believe this dreadful truth. Who had killed the girl? Why was a young, vibrant girl murdered in such a brutal manner? These questions quickly spread everywhere in the village, causing fear and confusion among the people. Those who once believed their village was a safe haven, untouched by crime, now began to suspect one another. No one knew who the killer was, and that made the atmosphere in the village suffocating and dark. The case soon caught the attention of the police, and an official investigation was launched. Experienced detectives arrived at the scene, searching for any clues that could answer the mystery surrounding the girl's death. Was this a random killing, or was there something hidden, a dark secret waiting to be uncovered? The old priest, the man once regarded as the embodiment of holiness and virtue in the small village, the old priest, was always the one people trusted with their prayers and shared their innermost secrets. In his 60s, with white hair and contemplative eyes, he exuded calm and wisdom. Every day, he performed rituals in the church, guiding the community in faith and morality. Beneath this dignified exterior, no one could have imagined that he was hiding a sinful relationship. While everyone respected him, the priest silently sank deeper into temptation, drawn to the young, newly grown woman. A secret relationship began with discreet meetings at the church, a place where no one would suspect. The 18-year-old girl, the young girl, with her gentle beauty, bright eyes, and radiant smile, was the pride of her family. Growing up in the village, she had few opportunities to explore the outside world, and the church became her place of solace and guidance. She once believed that her relationship with the priest would bring her happiness and protection, never imagining it would lead her to tragedy. With her naive heart and admiration for the priest, she was easily convinced to enter into a relationship that she didn't realize would plunge her life into an abyss. The villager who discovered the body. He was a middle-aged farmer, living near the edge of the forest, familiar with all the paths and trails in the area. One evening, as he hurried home to have dinner with his family, he detected a strange odor and was drawn to the horrific scene. As the first to report the incident to the police, he became a crucial witness in the case and was also the one who stirred panic in the community. At first, there was nothing unusual about the relationship between the 18-year-old girl and the old priest. The girl, with her innocent heart and devotion, frequently came to the church to pray and seek advice on life. Each time she stepped into the church, she felt a sense of peace, a tranquility she could only find in the presence of the priest, a man respected by the entire village. To her, he was the symbol of compassion, of spiritual guidance that she deeply admired. But then, those initial feelings slowly and strangely transformed. The priest, the one she would turn to for confessions of her innermost thoughts, gradually became a powerful presence in her life. He was no longer a distant figure. He became someone she felt close to, someone she eagerly anticipated seeing whenever she came to the church. The advice he gave her initially about faith became more personal, more intimate. She began to realize that his presence made her feel an unusual sense of safety, yet it was also shrouded in a mysterious allure. As for the priest, from the first time she came to confess, he began paying more attention to her. Her clear eyes, sweet smile, and vibrant innocence stirred something within him that had changed. He knew full well that what he felt was wrong, but each time she entered the church, he couldn't help but look at her with different eyes. To him, she represented something fresh, full of life, something he had never experienced after years of living within the confines of religious morality and discipline. Their initial meetings still maintained an air of reverence, But something different began to emerge between them. Each time she came, their gazes lingered a little longer. The priest's gestures became gentler as he listened to her confessions. Both of them sensed an undeniable attraction, yet neither dared to acknowledge it. The intimacy began with small details. When the girl confessed, her voice trembled as she shared her deepest secrets. The priest listened with understanding, but inside him, a repressed desire began to rise. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture of comfort, but to the girl, it was a tender touch full of emotion that made her heart race. Each touch, each exchange of glances, they both felt something different, an emotion they couldn't express but also couldn't stop. One afternoon, when she came to the church after the service, the church was silent, leaving just the two of them. The priest invited her to stay longer, to talk about the difficulties she was facing. They sat facing each other in the dimly lit room, with only the flickering light of the candles illuminating their faces. No words were spoken, only looks were exchanged, a closeness they had never felt before. The priest gazed at her with deep eyes, while the girl felt her heart beating faster with each passing second. He gently touched her hand, this time not as a priest, but as a man. The girl didn't pull her hand away. They sat there hand in hand, saying nothing, but the feelings between them became more apparent. The priest slowly leaned down, his lips just a few centimeters away from her hand, then gently kissed it, like a silent invitation. The girl looked up, her eyes sparkling but also filled with confusion. This was a feeling she had never experienced before, a mixture of fear and an irresistible attraction. Everything around them seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them in that dimly lit space. The priest knew he had crossed the line, but the desire had overwhelmed all reason. He pulled her into his arms, their lips gently touched, at first just a soft kiss, then gradually becoming deeper. Afterwards, their encounters were no longer just conversations about faith or everyday matters. The space between them was now filled with an unspoken tension, an irresistible emotion. When their eyes met, words became unnecessary. Both felt the growing temptation, fully aware that they were crossing forbidden boundaries. Each meeting, the touches became more natural, but also bolder. What started as gentle touches, like tentative explorations, gradually turned into longer, more deliberate strokes, soft, powerful, as if their skin wanted to remember every sensation. Her fingertips trembled the first time she touched his rough hand, and he could feel his heart racing as her smooth skin grazed his. A sense of desire seeped through every gesture, every intentional touch, as though both were exploring new emotions, not only through words but through their very bodies. Their kisses were no longer filled with initial hesitation. From the moment their lips first met, all shyness disappeared, giving way to suppressed longing. The feeling of their soft lips colliding was like a spark igniting the smoldering fire within them both. Each time their lips brushed together, she could feel his warm breath against her skin, his strength in contrast to the softness of her body. His hands began to gently touch the nape of her neck, pulling her closer, diminishing the distance between them as if nothing stood in their way. She responded with soft touches to his shoulders, drawing him nearer in her growing infatuation. They often met secretly after Mass, when the church was empty, the only light coming from flickering candles illuminating the quiet space. In that dimly lit sanctuary, they let themselves be carried away by the intensity of their feelings. The touches no longer stopped at boldness but extended up arms and across shoulders, as if the thin layers of fabric couldn't prevent their skin from connecting. She felt the rough yet gentle lines of his body through his clothes, while he savored the warmth and smoothness of her skin beneath his fingers. In those moments, nothing was rushed. Everything moved slowly, as if they wanted to savor every sweet yet sinful second. They knew what they were doing was wrong, but each touch made it impossible to stop. Their bodies sought each other out not only out of desire but also out of a shared loneliness and emotional deprivation. Their skin, hot and trembling, touched in a way that pushed them deeper into the abyss of forbidden love. Their breaths became heavier as the distance between them was no longer a barrier. Every time his hand lightly brushed her skin, she felt each rough yet warm line. Every time he pulled her closer, the gentleness wrapped in strength made her powerless to resist. Their lips entwined, their breaths merged, as if they were submerged in their own world, where nothing existed except two people letting their instincts take over. The quiet space of the church, once a place of prayer, now bore witness to their loss of control. Everything was slow but carried immense weight. They gradually shed the layers of hypocritical morality, revealing their deepest desires. In that moment, the taboo was forgotten, leaving only two people, bare before each other, abandoning all responsibilities and guilt, even if only for a few fleeting moments. Their burning skin touched, creating a stark contrast between the heat of passion and the coldness of sin. Though the priest was constantly tormented by guilt, he couldn't stop himself. Each time he looked at her, He felt himself being drawn deeper into the abyss of temptation. The girl, in her youthful innocence, let herself fall into the arms of the man she trusted and loved. They shared silent yet intense moments, known only to them. Their secret caresses in the dark corners of the church became a bond they both kept, and with each embrace their guilt deepened, but so did their attraction. However, this secret affair couldn't last forever. The girl, after feeling changes in her body for some time, discovered she was pregnant. Fear flooded her mind. She could no longer keep this secret. She knew she had to confront the priest, to tell him about their child and demand that he take responsibility. On a quiet afternoon, after the church had emptied, she met with the priest and told him the truth. She asked him to marry her to preserve her honor, not just for herself, but for the child growing inside her. But the priest, upon hearing her request, realized he was cornered. For him, everything suddenly turned dark, and from that moment, a sinister plan began to form in his mind. As time passed, the secret relationship between the priest and the young girl deepened. Each meeting drew them further into the depths of guilt and passion. Both knew what they were doing was wrong, but the allure and attraction between them were unstoppable. However, no one could have predicted that this sinful affair was about to lead to an event that would change their lives forever. One morning, while cleaning the house, the girl suddenly felt something wrong with her body. Symptoms like dizziness, nausea, and changes in her sensations made her start to suspect. At first, she tried to reassure herself that it was just a normal change. But after several weeks passed, the symptoms became clearer. She had realized the truth she didn't want to face: she was pregnant. Fear overwhelmed her. She couldn't believe that her secret encounters with the priest, the man she trusted and loved, could lead to this outcome. How could she keep this a secret? How would she explain it to her family and friends if it came out? More importantly, how could she face the priest? All these questions swirled in her mind, robbing her of sleep. Deep down, she knew she couldn't keep this secret much longer. A decision had to be made. After days of turmoil, she decided to face the priest and tell him the truth. She felt scared and confused but believed he would protect her. He couldn't abandon her in this situation. They had shared so many intimate moments, and he surely had to take responsibility. The girl trusted that the priest would find the best solution for both of them. On a quiet afternoon, after the church had completely emptied, she arranged to meet the priest at the place where they frequently held their secret conversations. She walked into the church, her hands trembling but trying to stay calm. The priest stood there, bathed in the dim light of the candles, looking as calm and solemn as ever. She walked towards him, her eyes meeting his, but this time, there was no longer any innocence in her gaze. She carried within her a fear and confusion that she couldn't hide. The priest immediately noticed something unusual in her demeanor. He asked her what was troubling her, and the girl, unable to delay any longer, decided to tell the truth. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice trembling. The words exploded into the quiet space of the church, making the atmosphere heavy. The priest stood still, his eyes deep in thought, his expression suddenly changing. The entire space seemed to freeze, as silence engulfed them both. "What should I do? I can't keep this a secret forever," the girl continued, her eyes filled with tears, her voice brimming with despair. "I need you to marry me, to protect my honor." "And this baby?" She looked at him, expecting a sympathetic response, a promise that he would stand by her, that he would protect her from the judgment of the community and her family. However, the priest's reaction was not what she had hoped for. He remained silent for what felt like an eternity. His mind was overwhelmed by the suddenness of the situation. He felt as if he were being cornered with no way out. His career, his reputation, everything he had built over the years, could collapse in this single moment. If the truth came out, the village would never forgive him. He wouldn't just lose everything, but he would become the enemy of the very community he had once led. These thoughts intertwined in the priest's mind. Everything he had tried to keep hidden was now surfacing like a storm about to break. He looked at the girl, but the tenderness and affection once in his eyes were gone. Instead, there was coldness and a fear for his own future. The girl, in her innocent gaze, couldn't detect the subtle change in his expression, but something made her feel uneasy. The priest tried to reassure her with a few soft words, but in his heart, a plan to escape reality had already begun to form. He promised her that everything would be resolved, that she needn't worry too much. But as the girl left the church that afternoon, a vague sense of fear lingered in her heart. She trusted that the priest would keep his word, but she also felt that something wasn't right. As for the priest, he knew that he couldn't let the girl live, nor could he allow the child to be born, for it would be proof of his sin. The price he would have to pay was too high to accept. From that moment, a plan to kill the girl began to form in his mind. cruel and calculated plan to protect his reputation. After the meeting with the girl, the priest left the church with a heavy heart. Her words echoed in his mind. She was pregnant and wanted him to marry her to protect her honor. This was impossible. As a priest, marriage wasn't just a betrayal of his faith but would completely destroy the honor and prestige he had built over the years. The priest felt trapped, with no way out. The only path to saving everything he had was to eliminate the girl, once and for all. The thought of killing the girl initially flashed briefly in his mind, but the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. He knew that if the girl continued to live and the pregnancy advanced, the sinful secret would soon be exposed. Not only he but also the church, the community, and his reputation would be destroyed. The priest tried to justify to himself that this was the only way, that there was no other choice. He had tried to reassure the girl, promising to take care of everything, but in his mind, the ruthless plan had already started to take shape. In the days that followed, the priest began to quietly prepare for his plan. He knew the area at the edge of the forest near the village well. It was remote, rarely visited by anyone. It would be the perfect place to carry out his cruel act. He calculated every detail, from the timing to the location, and how to hide her body so that no one would ever find it. The clearer the plan became, the more obsessed he was with the need to end it all as soon as possible. On a quiet afternoon, the priest decided to carry out his plan. He pretended to invite the girl to the church for a meeting to discuss their future. The girl, in her naive trust, thought the priest had decided to stand by her. She came to meet him without a shred of suspicion that this would be the last time she would ever see the light of day. As she entered the church, the priest greeted her with a light smile and his usual calm demeanor. He said they needed to find a quieter place to discuss everything without being disturbed. He suggested they take a walk to the edge of the nearby forest, the very place he had already prepared. The girl, still believing that everything would be resolved, happily agreed, without a hint of suspicion. They walked together along the narrow path leading into the forest. The girl didn't realize that each step was bringing her closer to the cruel fate that had already been planned. When they arrived, the priest chose a secluded spot, where the trees cast shadows and the distant sounds of the village faded into a faint echo. He began talking to the girl, listening to her express her worries and hopes for the future. She had no idea that he was simply waiting for the right moment to act. The girl began to talk about the child inside her, about her dreams that they would live together, raise the child, and preserve both of their honors. Her eyes sparkled with hope and faith, but that was when the priest realized he couldn't delay any longer. If he allowed himself to become emotional, he would never be able to follow through with his plan. For a brief moment, the priest hesitated, but immediately the fear of his secret being exposed overwhelmed everything else. He pulled out a small knife he had hidden in his robe, a small but deadly weapon that would be enough to end the girl's life. She didn't notice the danger until it was too late. When she turned to look at him, her eyes still full of hope, the priest struck quickly. The first stab took her by surprise, leaving her no time to react. She managed only a short scream before her strength began to fade. The priest, with cold calculation, didn't stop. He acted swiftly and mercilessly, determined to eliminate any evidence that could expose his sin. The girl collapsed to the ground, her eyes wide with shock and pain, but the priest felt no pity. He only felt a dark relief that it was almost over. After the girl had drawn her last breath, the priest quickly dragged her body deeper into the forest. He found a hidden spot, far from any paths, and began to bury her beneath the decaying leaves and damp earth. He believed that in this desolate place, no one would ever discover her body, and his secret would be buried forever. When everything was done, the priest stood still for a few seconds, looking down at the earth that now concealed his crime. A sense of emptiness filled his mind, but alongside it was a relief that he had dealt with the greatest threat to his life. He returned to the village, trying to maintain a calm and composed exterior, continuing his role as if nothing had happened. No one in the village could suspect that the priest they trusted and revered had just committed a ruthless act to protect his secret. But the priest didn't know that his meticulous plan wouldn't last long. Every crime, no matter how carefully hidden, will eventually be uncovered. The priest thought his plan was flawless, that the girl and his secret were buried forever under the soil at the edge of the desolate forest. He continued his life as usual, performing church rituals and living among the community with an air of sanctity, as if nothing had happened. He convinced himself that it was over, that no one could discover the truth. However, things are never that simple. A few weeks after the girl disappeared, the tranquility of the village began to unravel. Her family, unable to find her, became worried. They had tried to contact her many times and asked the neighbors, but no one knew where she was. Her mother, with a mother's instinct, began to suspect something was wrong. She reported her daughter's disappearance to the local authorities, and the police launched an investigation. Meanwhile, something unexpected occurred. A villager, a middle-aged farmer, happened to pass by the edge of the forest where the priest had hidden the girl's body. He often used this shortcut to get home from working in the fields. On that day, he suddenly noticed a foul stench in the air. At first, he thought it might be a dead animal, but the smell was too strong, sparking his curiosity, and he decided to investigate. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the smell of decomposition became unbearable. He discovered an unnatural pile of decaying leaves, and immediately sensed something was wrong. With a few quick motions, he brushed away the thin layer of leaves and soil, and to his horror, he uncovered part of a decomposing human body. The wide, lifeless eyes of the corpse stared back at him, as if accusing someone of the brutal crime. The man screamed and ran back to the village to report the discovery to the police. The police quickly arrived at the scene, cordoned off the area, and began a forensic investigation. The body was identified as a young woman who had been dead for several weeks. Due to the state of decomposition, identifying the victim was not immediate, but through the remnants of her clothing and other distinguishing features, the police gradually realized that this was the young girl who had been reported missing. News of the body's discovery quickly spread throughout the village. The entire community was shocked by the cruel truth that was emerging. No one could understand what had happened or why such a young girl had died in such a tragic way in the remote forest. The police immediately began investigating the cause of death. Villagers began to feel uneasy, not just because of the brutal murder, but because the killer had yet to be caught. The police started interviewing people close to the girl, trying to piece together her relationships and life before her disappearance. Initially, they focused on family and friends, but soon, rumors began circulating about a strange relationship between the girl and the old priest of the village. Some mentioned that she had been visiting the church more often than others, and that she stayed late, long after everyone else had left. This information couldn't be ignored by the police. They decided to expand their investigation and summon the priest for questioning. At first, the priest remained calm, answering questions with composure, claiming that his meetings with the girl were purely to offer moral guidance, as he had done for many other parishioners. However, as the police continued to probe deeper, inconsistencies in the priest's statements began to emerge. Even more suspicious were the forensic examinations of the body, which revealed foreign traces on the victim's clothing, along with fingerprints matching the priest found on objects near the scene. These small pieces of evidence began to paint a picture of a horrific crime, where the old priest, whom the entire community trusted, was now suspected of being the murderer. Although the evidence wasn't yet strong enough to convict, the police were deeply suspicious that the priest wasn't as innocent as he appeared. He was placed under close surveillance, and the investigation increasingly focused on the secret relationship between him and the young girl. The horrific truth was slowly being uncovered, and soon the community would have to face the fact that the man they most respected was the one responsible for the tragic death. The police investigation became more complex as the clues led them deeper into the relationship between the priest and the young girl. Initial testimonies from villagers only revealed part of the truth. Many believed the girl frequently sought advice from the priest at the church, but no one suspected that their relationship had gone beyond that. However, with the discovery of the body and suspicious details surrounding the girl's life, the police began to focus on clarifying every aspect of this relationship. During questioning, the priest remained calm and confident. He insisted that all the meetings between him and the girl were simply conversations about morality and faith. He admitted that she visited him quite often, but denied any suggestion that something unusual was going on. However, the police noted several gaps in his account, especially concerning the time leading up to her disappearance. The police continued to investigate the details of the girl's life. They found her phone, which contained several ambiguous messages sent to the priest. These messages didn't clearly indicate an illicit relationship but were enough to raise suspicions about the closeness of their connection. The girl had contacted him multiple times, and there were several long calls between them shortly before she went missing. This only deepened the police's suspicion that the priest was involved in her death. A crucial turning point in the investigation came when the police found more significant evidence at the scene. Footprints near the body were found to match the priest's shoes, the ones he often wore while conducting religious ceremonies. Although he initially denied ever being in that part of the forest, the physical evidence began to pile up, forcing him to confront difficult questions. Additionally, a small piece of fabric found near the body was analyzed and determined to match the priest's specimen. This was key evidence showing the priest's presence at the crime scene when the girl was murdered. The police began to realize that this was not just an unusual relationship but possibly a meticulously planned murder to conceal the priest's secret. The police also discovered that before the girl disappeared, She had confided in a close friend that she was facing a serious issue and needed to speak with the priest to find a solution. The friend didn't know the full details, but based on what was shared, the police suspected that the girl may have wanted to discuss her pregnancy, an event that she feared would ruin her life if exposed. Under the pressure of undeniable evidence, the priest began to falter during subsequent interrogations. His testimony no longer had the tight coherence and calmness it once did. The more the police pressed, the more he showed signs of fear. Eventually, he could no longer hide the contradictions in his statements. The investigators gradually pieced together the details, from the secret relationship, the girl's sudden disappearance, to the discovery of her body and the traces linking the priest to the crime scene. The suspicion that the priest was the murderer grew stronger by the day. Although the priest tried to maintain his dignified exterior, inside he was torn between guilt and the fear of being exposed. Everything he had built over the years, the respect of the community, his career in the church, was now on the verge of total collapse. He knew that he couldn't keep this secret much longer. The police investigation was nearing its conclusion. The evidence became increasingly clear, and the priest's name emerged as the prime suspect in the murder case. He had tried to conceal his crime behind a mask of virtue and the respect of the community, but the truth could not remain buried forever. It would soon all come crashing down, and he would have to face the consequences of his cruel actions. The pressure from the police weighed heavily on the priest. The long interrogations, the mounting evidence, and the growing suspicion from the community made it impossible for him to maintain his calm facade. Every time he faced the police, the priest felt as though he were being cornered with no escape. Anxiety and fear gradually became visible on his face, making the police even more suspicious. When the physical evidence was confirmed, the matching footprints, the fabric from the vestment, and the calls and messages between him and the girl, the priest knew that the truth was unraveling. His life, his career in the church, and the respect of the community he had worked so hard to build were all on the brink of collapse. He began to realize that he could no longer avoid responsibility for his crime. One day, when the police summoned him for what would be the final interrogation, the priest sensed the tension hanging in the air. He sat in the small room surrounded by the cold, piercing eyes of the detectives. He knew that this might be his last chance to tell the truth. The priest sighed, his eyes heavy with thought. After a few moments of silence, he decided to confess everything. With nothing left to lose, he began recounting the story, from the start of his secret relationship with the girl to the moment he decided to kill her to protect his reputation. His voice trembled as he spoke about their first meetings. He admitted that at first, their relationship was limited to religious conversations, but gradually, their feelings grew into something beyond the bounds of morality. The priest confessed that he had been captivated by the girl's innocence and youthfulness, unable to control himself. He described their secret meetings in the church after services and the guilt he had tried to suppress for months. When the girl told him she was pregnant, the priest panicked. He knew that if this became public, not only his reputation but his entire life and career would be ruined. Faced with that pressure, he began planning to murder the girl. He couldn't allow the secret to come out. In his mind at the time, the only way to protect himself was to eliminate the girl forever. The priest detailed the fateful afternoon when he lured the girl to the edge of the forest, promising that they would discuss the future. The girl, naive and trusting, followed him to the secluded spot without suspecting anything. He admitted that he had planned it in advance, carrying a knife hidden in his robe. When the moment came, he killed her without hesitation. She didn't have time to react, only managing a brief scream before her life ended. Afterward, he quickly buried her body beneath the decaying leaves and returned to the church as if nothing had happened. The priest's confession left the room in silence. The detectives listened to every word, their faces filled with horror. The man they were facing, a respected priest, a symbol of holiness and morality, had committed such a brutal crime. Though he claimed to have done it to protect his reputation, the price he paid was the life of an innocent young girl and the future of an unborn child. After confessing, the priest hung his head, as though all the life had drained out of him. He knew that his life had ended the moment he committed the murder. Nothing could save him now, and all he could do is face the consequences of his ruthless actions. News of the priest's confession spread quickly throughout the village, and the community was in shock. The man they once respected, the one they trusted, was now revealed as a cold-blooded killer. The village was engulfed in confusion, and their reverence for the priest quickly turned to anger. No one could believe that a man of such high standing could commit such a monstrous act. The church, once a symbol of peace and sanctity, had become a symbol of sin and betrayal. The priest's confession ended the long-running investigation, but it sparked a wave of shock throughout the community. News of the murder and the horrific truth spread beyond the village. The event shook the faith of the local people, who once saw the priest as a symbol of holiness and morality. From deep reverence, their feelings shifted to fury and disgust toward the man they had once trusted. The once peaceful village was now steeped in tension and unease. The priest, after confessing his crime, had no hope of forgiveness or redemption. He was arrested and brought to trial. The trial quickly became the focus of media attention, as people everywhere wanted to know the details of this gruesome murder. In court, the priest appeared gaunt and exhausted, no longer resembling the admired man he once was. He offered no defense for his actions, merely bowing his head and accepting guilt. His full and detailed confession did nothing to lessen the horror that people felt toward him. The entire community followed the trial closely. Villagers gathered outside the courthouse, many of them filled with disappointment, pain, and anger. They had placed their complete trust in this priest, but now he had been exposed as a cold-blooded killer, willing to murder a young girl to protect his false reputation. The trial ended with the maximum sentence for the priest, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He would pay for his cruel actions for the rest of his life. But the story didn't end there. The village had to face the collapse of the spiritual symbol they had once relied upon. The church, where the priest had served for many years, now became a symbol of sin and betrayal. Many villagers could no longer bring themselves to step inside the church, which had once been a safe haven for their spirits. Attendance at services dwindled, and the church's role in the community slowly faded. For many, the idea that someone they had trusted could commit such a heinous crime was unforgivable. The family of the girl was left devastated by the loss. Her mother, who had endured weeks and months of agony while her daughter was missing, now had to face the reality that her child had been brutally murdered by someone she had trusted. Guilt and sorrow engulfed the family as they realized that perhaps they had failed to protect their daughter. If they had known about the relationship earlier, maybe things could have been different. For them, the loss was a wound that would never heal, and every memory of their daughter was tainted by the brutal way she had been killed. The community began to question the nature of trust. This case was a painful reminder that people can easily be corrupted by power and desire. Even those who are supposed to represent holiness and morality can become murderers if they allow their desires to overtake their reason and conscience. The case became a cautionary tale not only for the villagers but for other communities watching from afar. The church, after the case, was gradually forgotten. People no longer came to pray, and it became a desolate, cold place. Those who once sought solace and guidance there could not forget that it had been the site of terrible sins. The building, once the spiritual center of the village, became a symbol of downfall and betrayal. As for the priest, he lived out the rest of his years in prison, isolated and shunned. He knew there was no way to undo what he had done. He had lost everything: his faith, his honor, and even his soul. Every day in prison, he was faced with regret and fear as a social outcast, with no chance to redeem himself. The case closed, but the shockwaves it left behind would remain with the village forever. The wounds it inflicted on the community would not heal easily. Fear and mistrust would continue to haunt them for years to come. Everything had changed, and although the village might eventually return to normal life, the memory of the priest's cruel crime would linger, a permanent reminder of human corruption.